You've stayed at the same level for 6 years while everyone around you moved up. I used to think that was humility. Now I think it's fear. My wife said that to me across our own kitchen table 4 days before she slapped me in front of 400 people at my company's annual gala. Every single person in that ballroom believed I was nobody. That was not an accident. I had spent 12 years arranging it. Before we go any further, if you want to see how this one ends, hit subscribe. I put up a story like this every week, and this is the one people come back to. My name is Darius Langford, and what follows is not a revenge story. It is a story about what people show you when they are certain you have nothing. 12 years ago, I started Orion Systems on a folding table in a room I rented by the week. No investors, no connections, a second-hand laptop. A business plan I had rewritten 14 times, and my grandfather sitting in the corner with a cup of coffee, telling me the only difference between a man who builds something and a man who doesn't is the decision to start. He died 3 years after the company turned its first profit. By then, Orion was worth more than either of us had ever put a number to. I moved every share into a trust under his name, the Langford Family Trust. And then I stepped out of the public face of the company I had built. People outside assumed the trust was run by anonymous investors. People inside knew there was a founder somewhere, but the name had never been attached to a face, a desk, or a title anyone could point at. That part I designed on purpose. I had watched too many companies rot from the inside while their executives performed their values for the boardroom and abandoned them in every hallway. I wanted to know how Orion behaved when nobody with ultimate authority was in the room. So I took a job there, internal control specialist, a mid-level auditor whose function is to review processes and flag irregularities. Unremarkable title, access to absolutely everything. Helena Price, whom I had brought in as chairman of the board, was the only person inside the building who knew what I was. We kept a private encrypted channel checked twice a day and one clear agreement. She ran the public face of Orion. I watched everything underneath it. Neither of us acknowledged the arrangement in any official setting ever. She was methodical, patient, and impossible to rattle. In 12 years, I never once saw her move faster than she needed to. It worked. For years it worked. Then Gavin Cross was appointed executive vice president. I met Sabrina at a friend's dinner party 4 years before Gavin arrived. She was sharp and funny and had strong opinions about everything from urban zoning to the correct way to make a roux, and she defended all of them at equal volume. I liked her immediately. We dated a year and a half before I proposed. When I told her I worked in internal controls at a mid-sized tech company, she did not flinch. She was building her own career in communications and had no interest in depending on anyone financially. We signed a prenuptial agreement at her request. Separate assets, clean lines. I respected her for it. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. I want to be clear about that because the rest of this is easier to tell if I lie about the beginning, and I'm not going to. Then Orion's communications department hired her. The change did not arrive overnight. It happened the way erosion happens at the edges, and by the time you notice the shape has changed, most of the work is already done. She came home later. She started talking about certain colleagues with a reverence she had never used for anybody. She began measuring things, our dinners, our vacations, our conversations against a standard that had been set somewhere I could not see. She said Gavin Cross's name for the first time about 6 months in. Gavin handled the Mercer account beautifully. Gavin gave a presentation today that had the room on its feet. Gavin offered to put me up for the director track. I did not think much of it at first. Then she started mentioning my car. The discrepancies in the financials were not obvious to anyone who was not looking for them specifically. I was looking for them specifically. That was my entire job. 14 vendor contracts came up in my quarterly review. Consulting agreements with firms that had no digital footprint, no registered office, no verifiable history of doing anything in our industry. The payments ran through a subsidiary account that reported to Gavin's division and bypassed the standard 2-signature approval through a procedural exemption Gavin himself had requested 8 months earlier. Somewhere between $30 and $40 million over 18 months moved in amounts small enough that no automatic review threshold ever woke up. I pulled every document twice, then I contacted Helena. How certain are you? Certain enough to want a second set of eyes, not certain enough to move. 2 days later, Monica Reyes knocked on my office door. She was 26, 2 years with the company, and she looked like somebody who had rehearsed what she was going to say so many times that the words had worn down to nothing. She sat across from me and put a manila envelope on the desk between us. "I copied these 3 weeks ago," she said. "I've been trying to decide what to do with them ever since." I didn't touch it yet. "What changed your mind?" She was quiet a moment. "My mother's sick. I can't lose this job. I need you to understand that I know exactly what I'm risking by sitting in this chair." She looked up. "But I haven't slept properly in 3 weeks, and I figured that had to mean something." Inside were printed wire transfer records. 11 of them matched fake vendor contracts I had already flagged. There were also 2 internal emails in which Gavin's assistant confirmed payment processing for invoices that corresponded to no actual work anywhere in the company's project files. Monica told me Gavin had already pushed 2 other employees out. One resigned under pressure after raising a question in a team meeting. The other was placed on a performance improvement plan within a week of flagging an anomaly to a manager who reported directly to Gavin. "He uses communications to bury the numbers," she said. "Every time there's a quarterly discrepancy, there's a press release that same week about a new partnership or an initiative. It moves people's eyes." I looked at her, and she looked back, and I understood she had already worked out the rest. "You know who signs off on those announcements?" she said. "My wife approved all external communications. I told Monica I would handle it and that she was not to discuss the conversation with anyone." I walked her out, came back and sat in front of those documents for a long time. I did not know yet whether Sabrina understood what she was signing. I did not know whether she was complicit or simply useful. There is an enormous difference between those two things, and I needed to know which one I was married to before I did anything I could not undo. That evening I asked her about Gavin. I kept it light, said I had come across his name in some internal paperwork and wanted to understand his role better, asked whether she thought he was the kind of person who would keep moving up. She put down her fork. "Why are you asking about Gavin?" "Professional curiosity." "You don't have professional curiosity about people above your pay grade. You never have." She picked the fork back up. "Is this because I talk about him? I want to understand the dynamic in your department. The dynamic." She used the tone I recognized, the one that meant she had been holding something for a while and had just decided to set it down. "The dynamic is that Gavin Cross has done more for this company in 3 years than most people manage in 10, and he gets recognized for it, which is apparently uncomfortable for some people." "I think he may be involved in something that could hurt you," I said. "I need you to be careful about what you sign without reading it first." She stared at me. "You're serious?" "Yes." She set the fork down, and this time she didn't pick it back up. "You review spreadsheets, Darius. Gavin runs a division of 400 people and is being discussed for the top job when the board looks at leadership next quarter." She pushed her chair back. "Please don't turn this into something it isn't." She went to bed. I stayed at the table until the food went cold because I had just given her the only warning I could give her without giving her everything, and she had handed it straight back to me. The next morning I found that my work laptop credentials had been used at 11:47 the previous night from a device registered to Sabrina's company profile. 14 folders accessed, 2 copied to an external location. I did not confront her. I contacted Helena. "She accessed your files." "She accessed files somebody handed her a password for," I said, and told her it was necessary. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it carefully. If I revealed myself now, Gavin would have lawyers in the building before we had the full chain assembled. The financial trail was solid. The operational trail, who instructed what when, through which channel, was not finished. Nothing yet, but I want full backup protocol on every device in my office. Anything accessed gets mirrored to the board server in real time. "Already done," Helena said, as of 11 minutes ago. I closed the laptop and looked at the ceiling for a while. I had built Orion so that people like Monica Reyes would have somewhere that protected them. I had built it so that the people doing the quiet, unglamorous work of keeping things honest would not have to face the consequences of that work alone. And I had married Sabrina because I believed she understood that what a person does when nobody important is watching is the truest version of who they are. I had been right about the company. The termination notice hit the internal system on a Tuesday morning. Monica Reyes, effective immediately. Grounds unauthorized manipulation of financial records and breach of data integrity protocols. I read it twice, then opened the attached documentation. Timestamps, access logs, altered transaction records, all of it pointing cleanly and exclusively at a 26-year-old junior accountant. Too clean. The kind of clean that takes deliberate effort to build. Gavin had decided the investigation was getting close, and he had done what men like Gavin always do when they feel a wall behind them. He found somebody smaller to stand in front of him. The notice had been routed through communications for internal distribution. It carried my wife's signature at the bottom. I went to her office. She was on a call when I knocked and ended it when she saw my face. I shut the door and asked her to pull up the document she had signed that morning. She turned to her screen as though it were an ordinary request. It came through HR. Gavin's office flagged it urgent. I processed it with the morning batch. Did you read it? I reviewed the summary. Monica Reyes is the person who brought me evidence of financial fraud in this company. She is being fired for doing that. The records she's accused of manipulating are the same records that prove what Gavin has been doing for 18 months. Sabrina looked at me steadily. That's a serious accusation. I know what it is. Gavin's office provided documentation. HR reviewed it. It came through proper channels. Her voice dropped not with concern, but with the exhaustion of somebody who has had a version of a conversation too many times. Darius, I don't know what you think you found or why you fixed on Gavin, but I'm not overriding a termination that cleared legal and HR because my husband has a theory. Suspend it 72 hours, that's all. Long enough for verification. I don't have authority to suspend a process termination. You have authority to flag it for review. You know you do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and what would you like me to tell Gavin's office when they ask why? There it was. Not what would I tell HR, not what would I tell legal. I left without answering because there was nothing left in that room worth saying. That afternoon, Gavin moved to the next phase. Our IT security team, which reported to a director who reported to Gavin, began what was described internally as a routine systems audit. By end of business, the transaction logs Monica had cited were overwritten on the primary server. A new file appeared under my name, timestamped 6 weeks earlier, suggesting I had accessed and modified the exact records Monica was accused of altering. It was competent work. Not perfect. Competent enough to create ambiguity, and in legal proceedings, ambiguity is very often enough. I forwarded everything to Helena. Her answer came back in 4 minutes. None of this touches the board server. Everything he's deleting is already mirrored. He's scrubbing a room with cameras in the ceiling. I told her I wanted to move at the gala. Why wait that long? Because by the gala, he'll have announced himself as successor in front of the entire company. He'll believe the evidence is gone and he'll have stopped watching. A man who thinks he's already won stops looking for the thing that ends him. Your call, she said. I'll have the board assembled and federal investigators on standby. I found the recording by accident. I had put a small audio device in the third-floor conference room 2 weeks earlier after my laptop was accessed. Standard precaution. I checked it every few days and had mostly collected scheduling arguments, and one vendor call that ran 40 minutes longer than any vendor call should. The file from the night of the termination was 43 minutes. The first 20 were Gavin. He walked my wife through the Monica situation with the smooth efficiency of a man presenting a quarterly report, a necessary correction, a liability that had to be cleared before the gala, a loose end that reflected badly on the department she managed. He told her my involvement in the audit was a problem that would resolve itself, and that after the gala, once his appointment was formalized, he would move her into the director role she had been working toward. Then he left and Sabrina made a phone call. I almost stopped the recording there. Something told me not to. It was a friend of hers, someone I had met twice at dinner parties. It started with small things, the day, the week ahead, and then Sabrina said she was tired. Not tired the way people say it when they need sleep. Tired the way somebody sounds when a weight has been on them so long they cannot remember standing without it. She said she was tired of going home to a man who had never wanted more than what he already had. Tired of walking into rooms where people asked what her husband did and having to work out how to make internal control specialist sound like something. Tired of being the only one in the marriage who seemed to understand that the world measures people by what they build and what they are seen to have. She said, Darius is good. She said it exactly that way. He's genuinely a good person. And then she said that was not enough anymore, that she had spent 6 years trying to want what she had and she did not want it, and she was finished pretending. "What are you going to do?" her friend asked. "After the gala," Sabrina said. "Gavin makes the announcement, and then I'm asking Darius for a divorce. I don't want to waste any more time." I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long while after that recording ended. I want to be honest about what I felt because I think it matters. It was not rage. It was not even grief, not yet. It was the stillness that arrives when something you have suspected becomes something you know. When the last small possibility that you were wrong closes quietly, and what remains is just the shape of the truth sitting there, waiting for you to look at it directly. She was not leaving me because Gavin had manipulated her. She was leaving me because she had looked at the life we built and decided it was not worth keeping. Gavin had given her a cleaner exit and a better story. The decision had been hers, and she had made it before he ever said her name. I sat with that. Then I started the car and drove back to the office because I still had 2 days of work to do. Gavin made his first move the morning before the gala. He sent a company-wide memo not routed through Helena's office and not cleared by the board announcing that he had been selected as chief executive designate and would be formally appointed following the annual celebration. It was written with the confidence of a man who believed there was nobody left who could contradict him. He was also careful about the evening itself. The venue layout had been redesigned so that the executive area, the front third of the ballroom nearest the stage, was accessible only to senior leadership and above. My clearance did not qualify. A security coordinator delivered the updated access protocol to my desk personally, which I understood to be a message dressed up as an administrative notice. I forwarded it to Helena. "Noted," she wrote back. "I'll make sure my seat has a good view of the room." There was one more thing I did that day, and I want to be straightforward about it because it is the part I've been asked about most. I called Monica. She had been fired 6 days earlier and had spent those 6 days waiting for a man she barely knew to do something. I told her I needed her at the gala. I told her exactly what to bring, exactly where to stand, and exactly how to hand it to me, which was badly, visibly, in the open near the middle of the floor where Gavin would see it happen. "You want him to catch us?" she said. "I want him to believe he caught us. There's a difference, and it matters." "What's actually on the drive?" "The real files," I said. "All of them. It's a complete copy, and it's a copy. There are 3 others he doesn't know about. If he takes it from us tonight in front of 400 people, that is a witness pool, and it's the last mistake he makes." There was a long pause on the line. "And if he doesn't take it, then we're back where we started and I move anyway. You lose nothing tonight either way. I want to be clear about that part." She said, "All right." Then she said, "You're very calm about this." I did not tell her it was because I had been planning it for 2 days and had already run every version of the evening in my head. There was exactly one version I had not planned for. I arrived early and stayed near the perimeter. Monica found me 40 minutes in, moving carefully along the edge of the crowd. Her badge had been deactivated with her termination, so she had borrowed a guest pass from a former colleague and walked in through the front like she belonged there, which she did. She pressed the drive into my hand without stopping. "Everything's on it," she said quietly. "Full transaction histories, the original files before the overwrite, the whole email chain from his assistant." I put it in my jacket pocket. "Are you actually going to do something?" she said, "or am I going to lose my job and nothing happens? Nothing is going to happen to you. I need you to trust me for about 30 more minutes." She nodded once. Then Gavin's voice cut across the room. He crossed the floor with 2 security personnel behind him and did it in front of as many people as he could manage, which was the point. He announced loudly with tremendous performative concern that Monica Reyes had trespassed on company property after her termination, and that I appeared to have just received stolen materials from a former employee under active investigation. The crowd arranged itself around us the way crowds do, people stepping back, a circle forming, phones not quite raised. Sabrina appeared at his side. I still do not know whether she was already nearby or whether she came when she heard him. Gavin told her I had been building a case against the company and feeding it to a disgruntled employee. He said this was exactly the behavior he had warned her about. He said she needed to make a choice out loud about where she stood. I looked at her across that space and I said her name, once, just that. She reached over and took the drive out of my hand. I let her. That was the plan. That was the entire plan, and it was working precisely the way I had drawn it up in my kitchen at 2 in the morning. Then, she looked at me, really looked for the first time in what felt like months, and she slapped me across the face. That was not in the plan. The sound of it carried to the back of the room. She dropped the drive on the floor between us, and Gavin stepped forward and crushed it under his heel. And then he put his arm around her shoulders, like a man collecting something he had earned, and told his security team to remove me from the building. I didn't move. I reached into my jacket and took out my wedding ring. I had taken it off an hour earlier, alone near the parking garage entrance, after Helena's final message confirming the board was in position. I had not put it back on, and I think somewhere in that hour I already knew I was not going to. I set it on the nearest table. Not thrown, just placed there. Gavin smiled at me. "You're done here," he said. "You were never really here to begin with." I looked at him. Then I looked at my wife, who was staring at the ring on the table with an expression I could not read. "I know," I said, and then I turned toward the entrance where Helena Price was coming through the doors with 7 members of the board of directors and 3 federal investigators. Helena did not rush. That is the thing I remember most clearly. The quality of her pace crossing that ballroom, not slow, not fast, the walk of a woman who had been waiting for the right moment and had correctly identified that this was it. The 7 board members spread out behind her without being directed, with the ease of people who had rehearsed and knew their marks. The 3 investigators stayed near the entrance, unhurried, watching. Gavin's security team looked at them, then at Gavin, then back at them, and did not move at all. Helena stopped in front of me. She looked at my face, at the cheek that was still warm at the ring sitting on the table beside me. Then she turned to the room and inclined her head toward me. "The board recognizes the founder and controlling shareholder of Orion Systems," she said, "Darius Langford." The silence afterward was complete. Behind her, the large display that had been prepared for Gavin's announcement came to life with something other than his remarks. The Langford Family Trust Incorporation documents, the original shareholder registry from 12 years ago. The ownership chain from the trust to the parent holding company to every subsidiary and division in the building. And at the center of it, time-stamped and unambiguous, my name, my signature, and a photograph of a younger man sitting at a folding table in a rented room, signing the papers that started all of it. I watched the room understand what it was looking at. I watched Gavin's face move through several things very fast. Disbelief, recalculation. Then the particular blankness of a man whose plan has collapsed and who is already sorting through what can be salvaged. And I watched my wife. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the screen again. She was not doing the arithmetic wrong. She was doing it exactly right, and the answer kept coming back the same. The gala where she had chosen to humiliate her husband was being held in a building her husband owned. The company she had told him he would never be a real part of was the company he had built out of nothing, on a folding table. The man she had just told to leave had nowhere to go, because there was no room in that building that was not already his. Gavin recovered first. He always recovered quickly. It was one of his few genuine talents. "These documents have been altered," he said loud enough to reach the back. "This is precisely what I've been telling all of you. He has been building a case against this company for months, manufacturing evidence." "The drive you destroyed was a copy," I said. He stopped. "There are 4. Monica handed me one tonight in the open in front of 400 people because I asked her to and because I wanted to see what you would do with it. The second is in Helena's possession. The third was uploaded to the board's secure server on the night my laptop was accessed, which is to say the night my wife used the password you asked her to take from me." I let that sit for a second because Sabrina needed to hear it, and so did everybody else. "Everything you have done since then, the deleted logs, the fabricated timestamps, the file you created under my name, all of it was recorded against a clean baseline that already existed before you started cleaning." He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at the investigators. "The 4th copy," I said, "has been with the Federal Financial Crimes Division for 48 hours. The investigators looked back at him with the patient expression of people who were standing exactly where they had expected to be standing. And then Gavin turned to my wife. I want to describe this part carefully because it revealed everything about who Gavin Cross actually was. He did not hesitate. He did not take even a second to consider whether she deserved better than what he was about to do. He turned to her the way you turn toward an exit when a building is burning. "She came to me," he said. "I want that on the record." Sabrina approached me. The access to his files, the communications she approved, all of that was her initiative. I raised concerns at the time. "I have documentation." The room went quiet in a different way. Not shock. The quiet of people watching something confirm itself. Sabrina stood completely still. I could not see her face from where I was, but I watched her shoulders, and I watched her hands, and I saw the exact moment she understood that the man she had reorganized her entire life around had just handed her over without a flicker of thought. "We're ready when you are," Helena said to the investigators. It did not take long after that. The board voted to remove Gavin while the investigators were still in the room. Unanimous 4 minutes. He was walked out by 2 federal agents with the efficiency of people who had done this often and had expected it to go smoothly. 3 senior managers who had processed payments through his subsidiary accounts without flagging a single one were suspended pending an independent ethics review. Helena found Monica at the edge of the crowd and brought her forward personally. I shook her hand in front of the full board and told her that her termination was reversed effective immediately and that she would be moving into a newly created role overseeing a dedicated internal audit division reporting directly to the board, rather than to any individual executive. She looked at me with the expression of somebody deciding whether to believe what she was hearing. "The position comes with a substantial salary adjustment," Helena added. Monica nodded slowly, and I watched the relief move through her. Not triumph, just the quiet, worn-out relief of a person who did a hard thing and found out it had been worth doing. Sabrina found me about 20 minutes later. She walked toward me, and I let her come because I owed her that, the chance to say whatever she needed to say. She looked different than she had an hour before, not diminished exactly, more like somebody who had been carrying a performance for a very long time and had set it down and was not sure what her face did without it. "I didn't know," she said, "about who you were. I want you to know that I genuinely did not know. I know you didn't. Gavin told me you were working against the company, against both of us. I thought I was—" She stopped and started again. "I was wrong about him. I understand what I was to him now." "I know that too." She was quiet a moment. "If I had known about the trust about what you built, I would never have treated you the way I did. I need you to believe that." I looked at her for a long time because that sentence was the whole thing, and she had said it without hearing it. "That's the part you're still not understanding," I said. "It isn't that you didn't know I had money. It's that you believed a man without money, without a title, without some visible marker of success, was someone you were allowed to disrespect. You didn't treat me that way because you were deceived about my net worth. You treated me that way because you decided that the version of me you could see wasn't worth the version of yourself you wanted to be." She didn't answer. "The problem was never that you didn't know I was wealthy," I said. "The problem is what you think about people who aren't." I didn't say it to punish her. I said it because it was true, and because I think on some level she had always known it and had spent a long time finding ways not to look at it directly. I left her there with it. The divorce was filed under the prenuptial agreement she had asked for at the beginning. Her personal assets stayed hers. Her professional consequences were not mine to hand out, and I did not hand them out. The board terminated her employment on its own determination because she had signed off on communications she should have read and passed information she should have questioned. She left the building that night without the title, without the marriage, and without the future she had rearranged her life to reach. I did not watch her go. I had other things in front of me. Gavin Cross was indicted on 12 counts including wire fraud, embezzlement, obstruction, and conspiracy. Total recovery exceeded $43 million. The trial was short, and the verdict surprised nobody. Orion built a formal whistleblower protection program legally structured, independently overseen, and written into the governance documents so that no future executive can quietly take it apart. We redistributed approval authority across multiple reporting lines. Power concentrated in one person is not efficiency, it is exposure. I came out publicly as the founder. Not because I wanted the attention, I still don't, but because I finally understood that my anonymity had created a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. Men like Gavin find the unlit corners of an organization and build there precisely because nobody is looking. Oversight is not about controlling people, it is about protecting them. Monica gave the opening remarks at the company's ethics summit that fall. I asked her before I asked anybody else, and I sat in the third row and listened to her talk about the 3 weeks she spent deciding whether to knock on my door. The fear of it, the cost-benefit analysis she ran 100 times. The night she decided that not sleeping was data and she ought to act on it. She was very funny about it, which surprised some people in that room and did not surprise me at all. At the following year's gala, I stood in the same spot on the floor where my wife had slapped me. We had changed the layout. The executive section no longer exists as a separate area. The room is arranged so that the accountants and coordinators and facilities staff and junior analysts sit at the same tables as board members, not as a gesture, as policy. I didn't make a speech about values. I've never trusted speeches about values. They reach the people who need them least and bounce straight off the ones who need them most. Instead, I watched a junior systems analyst named Patrick sit with 3 directors and explain a workflow problem in his department, and what he thought the fix was completely at ease. And I watched all 3 of them lean in and take notes. Not because they were performing humility, because Patrick was right, and it was a good idea, and it didn't matter whose badge it came off. That is what I built the company to be. Here's what I want to leave you with. Money does not change who people are. It only removes the excuses they were using to hide it. Sabrina did not lose her marriage because she failed to notice I was wealthy. She lost it because she had built a world in which people without visible success were acceptable to disrespect and then applied that standard to the man sleeping next to her. Gavin did not fall because he got caught. He fell because he had spent years treating human beings as instruments, and eventually one of those instruments, a junior accountant who had not slept in 3 weeks, walked into an office and put an envelope on a desk. And Monica didn't win because she was fearless. She was terrified the entire time. She simply decided that being afraid was not the same as being finished. The way a person treats somebody who can do nothing for them is the most honest measurement there is. If this one meant something to you, stick around, hit subscribe, and send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Every week I bring you a story like this one about people who chose integrity when it cost them something and what happened next.